In the heart of the scorch, a desert so vast and ancient it had forgotten the names of the stars that once charted its dunes, lay the broken body of a soldier. His name was Corwin, and his uniform, once the proud gray of the Terran Expeditionary Force, was now a ragged tapestry of dust, blood, and sand. He had been left for dead by his own retreating column, a casualty of a skirmish with the Kthar raiders whose skittering war machines had torn through his platoon like a scythe through dry grass. Now he crawled, inch by agonizing inch, across a landscape of cracked earth and razor-sharp silica, his throat a desert within a desert, his vision swimming with the heat-haze ghosts of his fallen comrades. His world had shrunk to the next breath, the next heartbeat, the next grain of sand that scraped against his raw skin. He knew he was dying. The sun, a merciless white eye in a bleached sky, was baking the life out of him. He thought of the cool streams of his homeworld, of the green fields he'd never see again, and a profound, quiet despair settled over him, heavier than the heat. He collapsed beside the skeletal remains of a long-dead sand whale, its colossal bones bleached to a ghostly white, forming a natural arch against the endless blue. It was here, in the shadow of this ancient leviathan, that he saw her. She was chained to the largest rib bone, her wrists bound by thick, black manacles that seemed to drink the light. Her skin was the deep, rich purple of a twilight nebula, a startling contrast against the monochrome wasteland. A cascade of white hair, impossibly clean and fine as spun moonlight, fell over her shoulders and down her back, tangled but luminous. She was humanoid, yet undeniably alien, with high cheekbones, a sharp jawline, and eyes that were closed in exhaustion or unconsciousness. Even in her captivity, there was a regal bearing to her, a sense of contained power that made the desolate place feel smaller, less significant. Corwin's soldier's mind registered the danger. A strange alien in the middle of nowhere was never a good sign, but his dying body overruled his caution. He had nothing left to lose, that he dragged himself closer, his movements stirring the fine dust at her feet. At the sound, her eyes snapped open. They were a brilliant, feral gold, slitted like a cat's, and they fixed on him with an intensity that should have frozen his blood. But his blood was already too hot, too thin. He saw no malice in those eyes, only a deep, ancient weariness and a flicker of surprise. She watched him, silent and still, as he reached the base of the bone she was chained to. He could see now that the manacles were fused to her wrists, and from a wound on her forearm, a slow, viscous fluid oozed, not red, but a deep, shimmering violet that seemed to hold its own inner light. Corwin's gaze locked onto that wound. His rational mind screamed at him, telling him it was alien, toxic, the blood of a creature he knew nothing about. But his body, his desperate, dying body, saw only liquid, only salvation. The thirst was a living thing inside him, clawing at his insides, overriding every instinct of self-preservation. With a final, shuddering gasp, he lunged forward, not at her, but at the wound on her arm. He pressed his cracked lips to the source of that strange, glowing ichor and drank. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. It was not water. It was fire and ice, lightning and starlight, all poured directly into his veins. He felt his cells scream in protest, then sing in ecstasy. His vision exploded into a kaleidoscope of impossible colors, his ears filled with a chorus of whispers from a million distant worlds. He felt his own failing heart stutter, then hammer against his ribs with a new, terrifying strength. He tore his mouth away, collapsing onto his back, his body convulsing as the alien essence rewrote him from the inside out. He could feel his senses expanding, stretching out across the desert, tasting the minerals in the rocks, hearing the scuttle of a beetle a mile away, seeing the heat signature of a sand viper coiled beneath a nearby dune. He was drowning in sensation, in power, in a life that was not his own. When the storm inside him finally subsided, he lay panting, his body humming with an energy he couldn't comprehend. He looked up at the alien woman, who was watching him with an expression of utter shock. Her golden eyes were wide, her perfect lips parted in disbelief. You drank my vitae," she whispered, her voice a low, melodic hum that resonated in his newly sensitive bones. "A human. You drank the blood of a Verkana." Corwin tried to speak, but his throat was raw, his tongue heavy. He managed a weak nod. He felt different, stronger, sharper, but also hollow, as if something fundamental in his humanity had been burned away and replaced with something cold and ancient. He could feel a hunger stirring inside him now, a hunger that had nothing to do with food or water. It was a hunger for that same violet light, for the energy that pulsed within the woman before him. "My name is Lyra," she said, her voice regaining some of its composure, though her eyes remained fixed on him with a mixture of awe and fear. "I am of the house of Nyx, a princess of the Verkana. My people are hunters of the void, drinkers of stellar energies, and our blood is the very essence of our power. For a mortal to consume it, it should have incinerated your soul." She paused, studying him as if he were a riddle the universe had just presented her. "Yet here you are, changed, alive." Corwin pushed himself up onto his elbows, his muscles responding with a strength that felt borrowed, alien. He looked at his own hands. They looked the same, but he could feel the power thrumming beneath the skin. What am I?" he rasped, his voice rough but carrying a new, resonant timbre. Lyra gave a small, humorless smile. "I do not know, Corwin of Terra. You are a paradox, a human vessel holding Verkana power. The universe has never seen your like." Her gaze drifted past him, towards the horizon where a faint cloud of dust was rising. "And it seems the universe will get its first look sooner than I thought." Corwin followed her gaze, and his new senses confirmed it. Kthar skimmers, their insectal forms glinting in the sun, were cresting a distant dune. They had found his trail. They were coming to finish the job. Panic, cold and familiar, began to rise in his chest, but it was quickly smothered by a wave of cold fury. He was not that broken soldier anymore. He stood, his legs steady, his mind clear and sharp as a honed blade. He turned to Lyra. "Can you break those chains?" She tested them, her powerful arms straining against the dark metal. "Not without a power source. They are null-field manacles, designed to contain my kind." Corwin looked at the approaching skimmers, then back at the violet blood still glistening on Lyra's arm. An idea, reckless and born of his new, predatory instincts, formed in his mind. He knelt before her again, not to drink, but to press his palm flat against the wound on her forearm. He focused not on taking but on giving, on channeling the strange energy he now held inside him back towards its source. He didn't understand how he knew to do it. It was as if his body remembered the language of her blood. Lyra gasped as a jolt of violet energy, now mixed with a faint silver luminescence that was uniquely his, flowed from his hand into her. Her eyes flared wide with shock, then with dawning power. The black manacles began to crackle and smoke. With a roar that was both feline and utterly alien, she wrenched her arms apart. The null-field manacles shattered, dissolving into black ash that was instantly scattered by the desert wind. She rose to her full height, a being of terrifying grace and power, her white hair whipping around her face like a banner of war. She looked at Corwin, her golden eyes filled with a new, complex emotion. Gratitude, curiosity, and a spark of something that might have been admiration. "You are full of surprises, human," she said, her voice now a low growl of anticipation as she faced the oncoming threat. The lead Kthar skimmer roared to a halt 50 yards away, its single, multifaceted eye fixing on them. Its pilot, a chitinous horror with too many limbs, hissed a challenge into the thin air. Corwin felt no fear. He felt only a cold, calculating focus. He could see the weak points in the skimmer's armor, could hear the whine of its overtaxed engine. He felt the desert itself, its heat, its silence, its patience, flowing into him. Lyra moved first, a blur of purple and white. She didn't run. She flowed across the sand, her movements silent and deadly. She met the first Kthar warrior as it dismounted, her hand lashing out to grab its head. There was a flash of violet light, and the creature's body crumpled, its life force drained in an instant. Corwin, acting on pure instinct, charged the skimmer itself. He didn't have a weapon, but he didn't need one. He leapt onto its hull, his hands finding purchase on the hot metal. He slammed his fist down on a specific seam in the armor, guided by his new senses, and felt the machine's internal systems short-circuit with a shower of sparks. The skimmer lurched and died. More Kthar were arriving, pouring over the dune like a tide of nightmares. But Corwin and Lyra were no longer prey. They were a storm. They fought back to back, a human and a vampire princess, their movements a strange, lethal dance. Corwin used his enhanced speed and strength to disable machines and create openings, while Lyra was a whirlwind of death, her touch draining the life from any organic thing she touched. He saw her hesitate for a split second before draining a Kthar, a flicker of what might have been regret crossing her features. A reminder that she was more than just a predator in the chaos of battle. kYeah found himself protecting her flank, his body moving to intercept a blow meant for her. Their eyes met for a brief moment across the carnage, and in that shared glance, a silent understanding passed between them. They were bound now, not just by the blood he had stolen, but by this fight, by their shared strangeness in a hostile universe. When the last Kthar skimmer lay smoking in the sand and the desert was quiet once more, save for the sigh of the wind, they stood amidst the wreckage, breathing heavily. kYeah felt the strange energy inside him settling, integrating. He looked at his hands again, and this time he saw not just a human hand, but a tool of immense, terrifying potential. He had saved her, and in turn, she had saved him. Though he wasn't sure what he had been saved into, Lyra walked over to him, her earlier regal bearing softened by a hint of vulnerability. She reached out and gently touched the side of his face with her cool, purple fingers. The contact sent a jolt through him, not of pain, but of connection. "You have a choice now, kYeah," she said softly, her golden eyes searching his. "You can try to find your way back to your own kind, to a life that will no longer fit you. Or—" She paused, her gaze drifting to the vast, star-dusted sky that was beginning to emerge as the sun finally dipped below the horizon. "Or you can come with me. The Verkana are scattered, hunted by empires who fear our power. We need allies. We need warriors who understand both the light of humanity and the darkness of the void. What will you become? Human who drinks starlight." kYeah looked from the dead Kthar to the endless desert, and then to the stars above. He was no longer just a soldier of Terra. He was something new, something forged in the crucible of the scorch and baptized in alien blood. The old life was a ghost, a memory from another lifetime. The path ahead was shrouded in cosmic mystery and unimaginable danger. But for the first time since he'd crawled from the battlefield, he felt a sense of purpose. He looked back at Lyra, at the princess who was now his anchor in this strange new reality, and a slow, determined smile spread across his face. His answer was not in words, but in the way he stood a little taller, his gaze fixed on the horizon where their next journey would begin. The universe had been shocked by what he had become, but it had not yet seen what he would do. The desert night was a shroud of cold velvet, the twin moons casting long, skeletal shadows from the wrecked Kthar skimmers. kYeah and Lyra stood in the silence that followed their brutal victory, the air thick with the ozone tang of fried electronics and the coppery scent of alien blood. kYeah's new senses were a constant hum, painting the world in layers of heat, sound, and energy he'd never perceived before. He could feel the slow, steady pulse of Lyra's power beside him, a comforting thrum against the vast emptiness of the scorch. "We must move," Lyra said, her voice a low murmur that cut through his sensory overload. "The Kthar are scavengers. Their masters will have felt their deaths." She turned her golden eyes to him, their feral slits now narrowed in thought. "My ship is hidden in the crystal canyons. 3 days' walk from here. It is our only hope." For 3 days, they journeyed across the unforgiving dunes. kYeah found his new body was tireless, needing no sleep, his thirst for water replaced by a strange, gnawing hunger for ambient energy. The faint glow of distant stars, the residual heat in sun-baked rocks. He learned to control it, to draw just enough to sustain himself without draining the life from the hardy desert lichens they passed. Lyra watched him with a mixture of professional curiosity and something softer, a growing respect. She taught him to focus his senses, to see the energy trails left by living things, to move with a silence that belied his human frame. In return, he used his old soldier's mind to navigate, to find shelter from the sandstorms that swept across the wastes like walls of glass. On the second night, as they huddled in the lee of a colossal rock formation, Lyra finally spoke of her people. The Verkana, she explained, were not mere vampires of blood, but of life force itself, a cosmic energy they called the ether. They were ancient, their civilization built on the ruins of dead stars, their power drawn from the very fabric of spacetime. But their existence had made them targets. The Galactic Concord, a vast coalition of lesser species terrified of their power, had declared them an existential threat. Her family, the royal house of Nyx, had been all but exterminated in a surprise attack. She had been captured by a Concord bounty hunter, a specialist in null field technology, and left to rot in the scorch as a message to any surviving Verkana. "They fear what they cannot understand," she said, her voice heavy with grief. "They call us monsters, parasites, but we are guardians. We maintain the balance of the ether, preventing its decay into entropy. She looked at Corwin, her expression unreadable. And now you are a part of that balance. A human anchor for a Verkana soul. Their journey was interrupted on the third day. They were cresting a ridge overlooking a vast salt flat when Corwin's senses screamed a warning. Not kthar this time, but something far more sophisticated. A sleek, obsidian-hulled cruiser of Concord design was hovering silently over the entrance to the Crystal Canyons. Its hull was marked with the sigil of the Concord's elite Praetorian Guard. "They found my ship," Lyra whispered, her face a mask of cold fury. "It is shielded, but they will have scanners capable of piercing its cloak." Corwin's mind raced. A direct assault was suicide. His new strength was formidable, but it was nothing against the firepower of a military-grade cruiser. He scanned the salt flat, his enhanced vision picking out details invisible to a normal eye. He saw the subtle shimmer of a thermal vent beneath the crust, the way the cruiser's repulsors were disturbing the fine salt crystals in a specific pattern. An idea, born of desperation and his mechanic's intuition from his old life, began to form. "There's a geothermal fault line running under that flat," he said, pointing. "The crust is thin. If we can cause a resonance." Lyra's eyes lit up with understanding. "You want to collapse the ground beneath them. It's our only chance," Corwin said grimly. "I'll draw their fire. You get to the ship. Once you're inside, use its main power core to send a focused energy pulse down the fault line. It should trigger a cascade failure." Lyra hesitated, her gaze locked on his. "That plan requires perfect timing, and it leaves you exposed." "I'm the bait," Corwin said with a humorless smile. "It's what I do best." Before she could argue, he was moving, sprinting down the slope towards the salt flat. His movements a blur of speed. Alarms blared from the cruiser as his presence was detected. A hatch opened, and a squad of Praetorian soldiers in gleaming silver armor rappelled down, their weapons humming with lethal energy. Corwin didn't engage them directly. He danced around their fire, using his preternatural speed to stay just ahead of their plasma bolts, leading them away from the weak point in the crust. He was a ghost, a taunting shadow, his every action designed to enrage and distract. High above, Lyra watched from the canyon rim, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She saw Corwin take a glancing hit to his shoulder, the energy bolt searing his flesh. He stumbled but didn't fall, his body already beginning to knit the wound closed with stolen starlight. The sight filled her with a terror she hadn't felt since her capture. Not for herself, but for him. This human, this impossible anomaly, was risking everything for her. She slipped into the canyon, her movements silent and swift, and reached her ship, the Nyx's Shadow. Its interior was a womb of polished obsidian and glowing violet conduits. She threw herself into the command throne and began the startup sequence, her fingers flying over the controls. Outside, the battle raged. She could feel Corwin's life force, a bright, silver thread in the tapestry of the ether, flickering dangerously close to the Praetorian's dark, hungry signatures. "Hold on, Corwin," she breathed, her voice tight with emotion. She channeled the ship's immense power, focusing it into a single, precise beam aimed at the geothermal fault. The ground beneath the salt flat groaned, a deep, tectonic rumble that shook the very air. Cracks spiderwebbed across the white expanse, racing towards the cruiser. The Praetorian commander, realizing the trap too late, ordered a full retreat. But it was too late. The salt crust gave way with a thunderous roar, collapsing into a boiling maelstrom of superheated steam and molten rock. The cruiser listed violently, half its hull swallowed by the earth, its engines sputtering and dying in the chaos. Corwin saw his chance. He broke from his dance of death and sprinted for the canyon, his body screaming in protest but his will unbroken. He could see the Nyx's Shadow powering up, its engines casting a soft violet glow on the canyon walls. He was 50 meters away when a final, desperate Praetorian fired a heavy-caliber slug from a railgun. It tore through his chest, punching a hole straight through his lung. He fell, the world going gray at the edges. He saw Lyra's ship lift off, a streak of purple light against the sky. He had done it. She was safe. As his vision faded, he felt a profound sense of peace. He had died a soldier, protecting something worth fighting for. But death did not come. Instead, a familiar, cool hand gripped his shoulder. He looked up to see Lyra kneeling over him, her face etched with panic and determination. She had come back for him. "You fool!" she hissed, tears of pure ether welling in her golden eyes. You absolute magnificent fool. Without hesitation, she bit into her own wrist, drawing a fresh flow of her luminous violet vitae. She pressed the wound to his lips. Drink, kYeah. Don't you dare leave me now. He drank, and the universe roared back into focus. The pain vanished, replaced by a flood of power so intense it felt like his soul was being reforged. He sat up, the hole in his chest sealing before her eyes, leaving only smooth, unblemished skin. He was whole again, stronger than before. Lyra helped him to his feet, her hand lingering on his arm. What you did back there? No one has ever done that for me, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Not for a Verkana. kYeah looked at her, at the alien princess whose blood now flowed in his veins, who had risked everything to save him in return. I told you, he said, his voice rough but steady. We're in this together. As the Nyx's shadow shot into the star-strewn void, leaving the scorch and its horrors behind, a new problem presented itself. kYeah's unique physiology, a blend of human resilience and Verkana power, was sending out a signal, a beacon of mixed energy that was utterly unique in the cosmos. On 1,000 worlds, in the deepest vaults of the Galactic Concord's intelligence network, alarms began to chime. A new file was created, classified at the highest level. Subject: kYeah. Threat level: Omega. The universe wasn't just shocked anymore. It was afraid. And where the Concord feared, they sent their most terrible weapon. The Silencers, a secret order of assassins designed for one purpose: to erase anomalies from reality itself. Their leader, a figure known only as the Warden, had already set his sights on the strange human-vampire hybrid and his Verkana companion. Their journey to the stars had just begun, and the true hunt was about to commence. The Nyx's shadow fled into the uncharted void, a lone speck of violet light against the infinite black. Inside, kYeah and Lyra were not celebrating their escape, but preparing for a war they hadn't asked for. The beacon of his hybrid nature was a siren song to the Galactic Concord's most terrifying secret: the Silencers. These were not mere soldiers, but living weapons, their minds and bodies stripped of all empathy and rebuilt for one purpose: erasure. Their leader, the Warden, was a legend whispered in the darkest corners of the galaxy, a being who had personally ended entire bloodlines deemed anomalous. Their first encounter came not with a fleet, but with silence. The ship's sensors went dark. The stars outside the viewport seemed to dim, as if a great shadow had fallen over them. Then, a single needle-thin vessel detached from the darkness, its hull absorbing all light. It was a Silencer skiff. They are here, Lyra said, her voice tight. She engaged the ship's defenses, but the Silencer vessel simply phased through their energy shields as if they were mist. A boarding pod latched onto their hull with a sickening crunch. kYeah met them in the main corridor. 3 Silencers emerged, their faces hidden behind smooth, featureless masks, their bodies encased in adaptive armor that shifted color to match their surroundings. They moved with a terrifying, synchronized grace. Their weapons weren't guns, but resonators that vibrated at a frequency designed to unravel molecular bonds. The fight was brutal. kYeah's speed and strength were immense, but the Silencers were relentless, their attacks precise and calculated to exploit his human weaknesses. He shattered one's mask with a punch, revealing a face that was not flesh, but a network of glowing filaments, a mind uploaded into a synthetic body. He felt a pang of horror. These were not men, but ghosts and machines. Lyra fought with her own terrifying power, her touch draining the artificial life from their systems, causing their armor to crackle and fail. But for every one they disabled, another seemed to take its place. They were being overwhelmed. In a desperate gambit, kYeah remembered the geothermal trick on the Scorch. He knew the Nyx's Shadow's power core was unstable, a relic of Verkana technology that ran on raw ether. He made a choice. Lyra, get to the core, he yelled over the din of battle. Overload it. I'll hold them. She understood instantly. Her eyes met his, filled with a terror that mirrored his own, but also a fierce, unwavering trust. She turned and fled towards the engine room. kYeah became a wall of flesh and stolen starlight, throwing himself between the Silencers and her path. He took blow after blow, his body healing almost as fast as it was broken, buying her the precious seconds she needed. He heard the rising whine of the core from deep within the ship. The Silencers, sensing their mission failing, converged on him with a final, unified assault. Just as their resonators were about to tear him apart, a wave of pure, Concussive ether erupted from the engine room. It wasn't an explosion of fire, but of pure, nullifying energy. It washed over the silencers, their synthetic bodies shorting out and collapsing into inert heaps. The boarding skiff, its connection severed, drifted away into the void. Corwin, battered but alive, stumbled to the engine room. Lyra was there, slumped against the console, her white hair matted with sweat, her purple skin pale with exhaustion. She had pushed her own power to its absolute limit to control the overload. "You did it," he breathed, helping her to her feet. "We did it," she corrected weakly, leaning into him. "But we cannot keep running. The Warden will not stop. He will hunt us across every star system until we are dust." In that moment of shared vulnerability, a new plan formed, not born of fear, but of defiance. They wouldn't just hide. They would expose the truth. Lyra knew of a neutral data hub on the fringe world of Viridia, a place where information was the only currency. There, they could broadcast the truth about the Virkana, not as monsters but as guardians, and reveal the Concord's genocidal campaign against them. They would turn their beacon from a liability into a rallying cry. Their journey to Viridia was fraught with peril, but they were no longer just fugitives. They were a symbol. On Viridia, using Lyra's knowledge and Corwin's tactical mind, they hacked into the galactic news networks. They showed footage of the Virkana's ancient cities, their role in stabilizing dying stars, and the cold, calculated brutality of the Concord's purge. They showed Corwin himself, a living testament to the possibility of coexistence between their two peoples. The broadcast sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Uprisings began on worlds tired of the Concord's tyranny. Old allies of the Virkana, long thought extinct, began to emerge from the shadows. The narrative shifted. The Chimera was no longer a monster, but a hero. The silencers, once feared, were now seen as the tools of a corrupt regime. The final confrontation came not in a grand space battle, but in the heart of the Concord's capital. The Warden, his patience exhausted, came for them personally. He was not in a ship, but in a massive biomechanical suit of war, his true form a withered ancient thing at its center. He cornered them in the data hub's central spire. "You are an error in the equation of reality," the Warden's voice boomed, a chorus of 1,000 dead voices. "You will be deleted." But Corwin and Lyra were ready. They fought not as separate beings, but as one. Corwin used his human ingenuity to find the suit's physical weak points, while Lyra channeled her etheric power through him, amplifying his strikes to cosmic levels. Their bond, forged in blood and sacrifice, was their ultimate weapon. In a final, blinding flash of silver and violet light, they overloaded the Warden's core, not with destruction, but with pure, unfiltered life force. The very thing he had spent his existence erasing. The paradox shattered him from the inside out. With the Warden gone, the silencer program collapsed. The Galactic Concord, its darkest secret exposed, was forced to the negotiating table. A new era of peace, fragile but hopeful, began to dawn years later, on a quiet green world far from the deserts of the Scorch and the politics of the core. A small house stood on a hill overlooking a peaceful sea. Smoke curled from its chimney. Inside, Corwin, his hair now touched with streaks of silver that shimmered with a faint violet light, sat by the fire. Lyra, her purple skin glowing softly in the firelight, her white hair braided with simple wildflowers, leaned against his shoulder. Their children, a boy and a girl, played on the floor, their skin a perfect blend of human tan and Virkana purple, their hair a cascade of silver white, their eyes a warm, intelligent gold. They were no longer the dying soldier and the chained princess. They were husband and wife, father and mother. They had faced the wrath of the universe and not only survived but changed its course. Their story, once a whisper of fear, was now a legend of hope, a testament to the power of an impossible love that had bridged the gap between stars and saved two peoples from a future of endless war. And in their quiet home, with the sound of their children's laughter filling the air, they had found the happy ending they had fought so hard to earn. The peace treaty was signed not on a cold slab of durasteel in some sterile galactic chamber, but beneath a canopy of blossoming star lilies on the very world they had chosen to call home. A planet named Ethel, a place of gentle hills, clear rivers, and skies that shimmered with the soft light of two kind suns. It was a world that welcomed both human and Virkana, a living symbol of the new covenant forged in their names. Corwin stood at the end of a petal-strewn path, his simple tunic of woven sky silk a stark contrast to the gray uniform he'd once worn in the Scorch. He was no longer just a soldier, but a man who had helped rewrite the future. His eyes, now holding a permanent, gentle luminescence of silver, scanned the gathering crowd, humans, Verkana, and a dozen other species who had been inspired by their story, all united in quiet celebration. Then she appeared. Lyra walked toward him, not as a princess in armor, but as a bride. Her gown was the color of twilight, flowing and elegant, woven from threads that caught the light and held it. Her white hair was unbound, falling like a river of moonlight over her shoulders, adorned only with a single circlet of living crystal that pulsed with a soft, violet warmth. Her golden eyes, once sharp with the feral hunger of a hunted predator, were now filled with a profound, peaceful love as they locked onto his. There were no grand pronouncements from a high priest or a galactic official. Their vows were their own, spoken quietly, sincerely, for each other and for the life they had already built together through fire and blood and impossible hope. kYeah promised to stand beside her, to protect their new world, and to never let the darkness of the past define their future. Lyra, her voice a melody that resonated in the hearts of all who heard it, vowed to share her power, her eternity, and her heart with him, to build a family and a legacy of peace from the ashes of war. As they sealed their vows with a kiss, a cheer rose from the crowd, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy that echoed across the hills of Ethel. In that moment, the last ghosts of the dying soldier in the desert and the chained alien princess were finally laid to rest. They were simply kYeah and Lyra, husband and wife. Their home, a beautiful blend of human craftsmanship and Verkana bioluminescent architecture, stood waiting for them on their hill overlooking the sea. Inside, their children's laughter was a constant, happy music. Their son, kYeah, with his father's determined jaw and his mother's golden eyes, and their daughter, Elara, whose hair shimmered with the same silver-violet light that now flowed in their father's veins. They were a new generation, a living bridge between two worlds, proof that love could overcome even the deepest divides of the universe. Years turned into decades, and their love only deepened, a quiet, steady flame that warmed their home and their community. They watched their children grow, find their own paths, and build families of their own. kYeah, his human lifespan extended and enriched by the Verkana essence within him, aged gracefully alongside his immortal wife, their bond a testament to a love that had literally shocked the universe into a better shape. And so, in their peaceful home on Ethel, surrounded by the family they had fought so desperately to create, kYeah and Lyra lived out their days in perfect, satisfying happiness. A true and final happy ending earned through courage, sacrifice, and a love that defied all odds.